stream live or can we go live? Okay, thanks. So, hey everyone, this is Consensus Layer Call 151. I'll drop the agenda here in the chat. It's issue 1280 on the Ethereum PM repo. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So first up, Electra. Let's start with DevNet 6. If there are any open questions there, let's see, is Harry here? Or maybe PK? Yeah.
Nope,
Would you
Harry
give an
is not.
update on DevNet 6?
Yep. Can give a quick update. So actually there are no big updates this time, which is good. We have updated all the client images to their latest releases they made ready, and the DevNet looks totally stable. We have 97% participation. So yeah, everything looking good. The only thing that's open right now is the math workflow, which Justin has been heavily working on. Not sure if Justin is here. Maybe he can give a quick update on that.
Yeah, I'm here. We've been currently testing the SSE workflow with the clients and builders and NetBoost, and that's going really well. Most clients have that. There still is an issue with the builder, like Flashbot's R builder. I don't know the status of that, but I know that they're working on it, and I hope they get it fixed soon.
Gotcha. Yeah, just quick, by the way, if any Reth people are listening, I think they could use some help, especially if you have some spare cycles. We had a MedBoost community call yesterday, and this came up, and yeah, it sounds like I think it's mostly in the R builder layer, but maybe some interaction between R builder on top of Reth and execution request and state root calculation, and something in here is a little off right now. But otherwise, yeah, that is ongoing. Okay, great. Roman says they're on it. And otherwise, yeah, good to hear about the DevNet. Yeah, it looks super stable last time I looked at it. What else? There was a question about attestation aggregation. I saw some Discord comment. Oh, Mario.
Just a very quick thing. System contracts are up in Holeshki, Sepolia, and Mainnet now. But yeah.
Okay,
for
awesome.
EIP 2935, 7002, and 7251. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. And the contract addresses are in the EIPs as well, if anyone is wondering. So thanks for doing that. I did want to touch on this question of attestation aggregation. I saw some messages in Discord that I think the algorithms need to be updated a bit given the new format. Is there anything there to discuss, or do we feel good about that? Right?
Yeah. Hi. So the Prism had basically two issues with how we aggregated attestations for Electra. One of them was easy to fix, but it was just about the aggregates for one slot not being ordered by attestation bit count. So that I think was raised by Enrico, and thank you for that. And we have fixed it already. But the second one is a bit more hardcore, and we are not exactly sure how other clients do that. So if someone could share, that would be great. So when we have the attestation pool and we have aggregated attestations for one committee, and then we see a block coming, the block has on-chain attestations that are for multiple committees. And so the way we did that in phase zero is, we removed all aggregated attestations from our pool that matched attestations in a block. But now, because the block attestation is, as a superset, there's no it's hard to match. And so because of that, we did not remove anything because there was no match between an on-chain attestation and a aggregated attestation. And that's why we have been leaving attestations for previous slots in the pool and then packing them again. So my question is, how do other teams decide? What is the algorithm for the other teams to remove attestations from a pool when you see a block coming? Or do you not remove them and do something else? Because we're not sure what to do exactly. Any option is kind of feels bad and out of computation, etc.
Want to go?
Yeah. So how that works now is that we do a conversion of the attestation coming in, and we put in the pool in the new format with the committees index and all the attestation bits. So we are actually able to compare them no matter what. So yeah, it will be add probably additional complexity in the algorithm, but is fully aware of comparing everything. So at the end, we will work as phase zero essentially in this regard.
Do you have the code already in your client for that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I will take a look at what Teku does, and
Yeah,
hopefully hopefully something like that can work for us. So thank you.
you're welcome. So
Do
what
others-
I can just add one thing. We also add a change in our side, which is the easy part mentioned by Radek, which is the sorting capability. Before Electra, we were not all thinking about sorting attestation because the block was able to handle 128 attestation, so it was not that relevant to apply sorting, but now is really a big thing, and we added this sorting. It's already emerged in master and deployed on DevNet 6 and is looking good, even if there are still potential better sorting of attestation cross slots, but at least within the same slot we're doing definitely a better job and should be good enough for DevNet testnet. Sorry.
Yeah, one more thing I would like to add, which is general thought, is that I think all clients have different algorithms, even for packing. So I mean for packing basically, and there might be some other bugs. So I expect when we go to Holesky, there might be a whole lot of difference with the participation depending on which client is packing. I think we might run into some, hopefully not havoc, but I think that there will be quite some unexpected blocks in terms of attestation inclusion. I think so. We should be ready for that, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's good that we have client diversity here and different algorithms. So attestation that has been left out by one client maybe it will be included by others, which is very, very nice. And yeah, I want to echo what also Paul's is saying on the chat, because now the block print will be completely messed up. Because not only because attestation changed the format, but also because algorithm has been updated by clients.
Right. But it didn't sound like this was just like sort of, natural variation client to client. It sounded like this was somewhat critical to like the actual efficiency of getting things on chain.
Yeah. Actually, it was slightly inefficient on previous, but it is becoming can be considered critical now in Electra.
Right. So yeah, just flagging this, and I assume other CL clients feel okay about this. Solius.
Yes, I'm just thinking, is there any way to launch a very temporary network which would have like 1 million or so of validators, so we can test this packing thing. So I know that it's tricky with large number of validators, but maybe Ops team could comment, is there any way, because it would really be great to do a very short lived network with a huge number of validators to test the packing thing.
Right. Well, we might just do it live on Haleshi. We'll see. Enrico.
Yeah, this brings me thinking about So one condition that makes everything a little bit worse is having lagging clients actually voting for all the heads. So imagine that you have 50% of nodes correctly following the chain, and then the other 50% are voting for n minus one, n minus two, and minus three, and actually producing attestation for recent heads, let's say. And this could leave us some attestation on the table still. Yeah, so something like that.
Notice.
Oh, it's just a question. Are you worried, Enrico, that like half the network is not updated and is going to be voting for pre-fork blocks, or you're worried
No,
that?
I was worrying in a situation where the network is not really healthy, and some
Okay, yeah. So that is more of an issue. The other one doesn't worry me that much.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
yeah. If we switch it, yeah, that's more of an actual problem.
So PK says they're preparing a mainnet shadow fork. I guess one question, PK, is do you know if that will happen before Heleshki?
We had some problems with our infrastructure there. I'm not fully sure what's the status, but as far as I know, the nodes were syncing last time, so should be happen before Poleshki then.
Okay. If it does, we can take a look there. Otherwise, we'll look at Heleshki and see what happens. What is the client distribution on Heleshki? Like, if this is just a Prism issue, then it might not be too impactful. I guess let me ask this. Are we okay just to have Heleshki proceed and see what happens here? Okay. Yeah. Okay, but then yeah, we can definitely look at Heleshki and take a look. Testnets are for testing. Great. And yeah, that was the next topic I wanted to bring up, just testnet readiness. So many clients had testnet release. Well, I guess all the clients had testnet releases for the testnets. I feel like some of these changes that we've been discussing are maybe going to prompt another release before mainnet. Anyone feel like they need to? Well, let me ask this: do people feel okay with the testnet releases they've had, given maybe these attestation questions or anything that's evolved since? Okay, I'll assume that's yes. But let's be sure to look at this attestation thing on Heleshki. Okay. Anything else for Pectra? Okay. Then next, we will turn to PureDOS. So perhaps to kick us off, there's PureDOS DevNet 4. I heard there was an issue with, yeah, maybe someone can explain, like, is it that everyone is running Geth as an EL on that DevNet? I'm not sure if anyone here made it to the breakout this week.
I think the issue was that a change needed to be added to the EL, and Jimmy asked if they could like switch off EOF somehow, so that they don't test EOF plus PureDOS together.
Okay. I guess no one here knows anymore. Fair enough. So they have been working on DevNet 4.
I don't know anything, but maybe I can try. So one thing that we kind of discussed in the EOF call is that we would like to add, or we would probably like to add another transaction type, and also something that I think came up is whether PeerDAS is going to add another transaction type or reuse the existing transaction type, and that will kind of inform. Well, we kind of need to organize who's going to take which number for the transaction types. That's something that we need to discuss as long as PeerDAS is going to take another transaction type, and otherwise, yeah, as Kev already said, we need a way of turning off UF on the execution layer, but that is very easy. So in Geth, it should be like a 2-line change.
Okay. Is this something? How can we move forward on the EOF thing? Like, should we? I can go to the next EOF breakout and bring this up, or perhaps we can discuss on ACDE next week.
I think we should discuss on ACDE next week.
Okay. So let's do that there. And yes, so then there were a few things, but we'll go ahead and go to this one. So we had agreed to move the proof computation that was happening in the CL into the EL. With PeerDAS, there's like a slightly different set of proofs. The computation is like somewhat heavy, and so it helps many timings on the CL side to just go ahead and push them to the EL. And I think Tim already grabbed the PR here. Yeah, 9378 as a PR to the IPs repo. And this introduces the change. I think, let's see here. Yeah, Francesco also grabbed this document here from Jimmy that explains it a bit more. So I think that was all pretty straightforward. And then the question came up of, well, yeah, so the first one is a question of transaction type. As far as I understand, we don't need a new transaction type. We will need to change the network level wrapper that we have. So the way the PeerDAS transaction then would be gossiped, would need to accommodate these new proofs. They would be made in the EL, but we shouldn't need a new transaction type. So I think we're okay on that point that Marius raised. There was then a question that came up around essentially migration and like how this would actually work if we do move the burden of this proof computation to the EL. And there is an idea basically to have the EL try to do like a dynamic translation. Say if you get a 4844 style transaction, you would then do the recomputation in this new way that we need for PeerDAS. And I know we wanted to touch on that today. There's hands already, so Terrence and then Daniel.
Yeah, I think as far as this goes, this also relates to the consumers of the blobs, right? So today they're mostly layer twos. So it may be good to also bring this up in the rolled code to see what they think. As far as I know, as far as I read around, I don't see any concern of like not having maintained two versions, meaning that layer twos currently they do not future sign blobs. They basically will essentially sign that dynamically in a way that when the hard fork triggers, they will just sign a different transaction type. So it doesn't need to be like compatible in that sense. But yeah, I think Rob may also be a good revenue to ask like what they think about this issue.
Yeah, we could. I mean, okay, so there are at least some EL clients here, like what would they prefer to do? And maybe Daniel, I tease you up.
Yeah. So I checked basis code, and in our case, it would be much easier to add a new transaction type and to deprecate the existing 4844 one. The reason for this is just that we have already existing logic to add and remove transaction types for a hard fork. But we don't have anything like that to change the definition of transaction type at a hard fork. So I mean this would be more complicated. And And then the other thing with the dynamic conversion of the 4844 transaction to the new one with the cell proofs, I would rather avoid that because it's kind of a DOS attack vector. Because I think there were numbers floating around that one of these conversion takes like 150 milliseconds on average hardware. So if you only send a few transactions to the EL, yeah, it's a lot of computation that needs to be done. And we will need to take care of this by adapting the transaction pool, which would be quite a lot of work, I think.
Gotcha. Lukash?
So this is strictly EL's thing speaking, so I'm not sure if correct call to discuss, but could we just do that new wrapper and bump ETH protocol version, and then on that new protocol version we would use new wrapper? Would it? I'd not see problems with that, but I'm not sure.
Can we, like, I think we can distinguish the two wrapper types based on the length of the proof anyway, so it should be kind of easy to distinguish between them. But
why not protocol version?
Well, we can also do the protocol version, but we historically didn't change the protocol version if we bumped something within the message, only if like the overall format of the message is changed. But we can do a new protocol version. Doesn't matter. Also, yeah, we should probably discuss this on the ER call.
Okay. Any questions then now about this topic? I mean, one thing about figuring it out here, at least if there's any progress we can make, it just lets us move faster with Beardos. Okay. I'll be sure this is on the agenda for next week. And then otherwise, there's a message here from PK, DevNet 5 of Beardos is up. There's some links here. So let's see without UF support. Okay, great. Cool. So that's exciting to see. Let's see what else. So we covered that and this. Okay, I did want to call this out. Jimmy made a PureDOS readiness checklist. I'll grab the link. This is super cool to see, just to kind of track all the things we kind of need to do. We've had readiness checklists like this for previous forks, say like the merge, say like 4844. And yeah, there's a list here. So please take a look, add a comment if there's something missing. And that being said, this should help us track what we need to do and keep moving forward on PureDOS. Okay. Next up was a request to discuss the block count in Fulu right now. I believe the way PureDOS is written, I think the average block count is 12 or something. And this is quite far from the theoretical maximum. That would be 8x on top of Pectra. So say that's, 6 and 9. 6 would go to like, 48, about 50 blobs. So then the question is, do we want to go ahead and update the Fulu specs to reflect this now? Or how do we want to handle this? I believe it's 12 right now, essentially just for like early R&D. There's a lot of new infrastructure to deploy and test. And, if we have that on top of, say, like a much larger blob count, it's, you can imagine complications that get in the way of sort of this primary testing, simply because there's like too many blobs floating around the network. On the other hand, what could happen is we never change this number and just don't get the scale that we could otherwise. Ansgar's here. You brought this up. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I mean, I'm unopinionated about whether we should change it immediately or a little bit down the road. I think that just rely on client teams, whether if there's a strong desire to basically first get to stability with like a low throughput and only then push it a bit more to the limits, then that would be fine with me. I just think it's important that we figure out a way to pre-commit to that. That's basically the plan. Because I think in principle, the DevNets should always push as like at least towards the mature side of DevNets, they should always push to as high as we can go, and then we can always consider for mainnet to roll it out a bit lower than that if we have worries about specific like stability things or something. So yeah, I think basically ideally we at least have a plan of like when are we moving the DevNets over to 48 blobs target throughput. Yeah, and I think for context on where that 8x number came from, I don't know if Francesco's probably also on the call, if he'd want to repeat that briefly.
Yeah, I mean, it's just very napkin math thing of that if you're if you're just a full node or a validator with up to 8 or a node with up to 8 validators, you're only downloading 1/8 of the total data. So that's basically what it is. So it's just multiplying the backtrack throughput for and yeah, that factor.
Right. So one way forward here would be to put up a PR that just has this diff to Fulu. That's some kind of pre-commitment, and we can navigate that as we go through R&D. Mark did want to make a comment on BPO, and this would be one strategy is to start with say the 12 of Fulu right now, and then maybe raise it some, but not to this full 8x number that we should be able to get to. And then have this notion of BPO forks that we've discussed a few times on the call now, that would scale up to this maximum that we think we can support. Was there anything else you wanted to discuss with the BPO concept, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, just to give a quick definition of BPO forks, if people have been following, the idea is just that at a certain epoch and timestamp, we do a kind of pseudo hard fork where we change the target blobs and the max blobs and optionally the base fee update fraction on the EL. And if we could make these parameters much more flexible, we can avoid all the boilerplate code that comes with doing a standard hard fork. And there's a lot of advantages of this that, we'll have like mainnet data and be able to optimize bottlenecks in our implementation as we kind of adjust the blob count upwards. And as far as I can tell, there seems to be sort of two ways that we can do this that we're thinking of. Either make it like a config change or do some kind of on-chain voting mechanism similar to the gas limit. I tend to vote towards the config change for now just because it's a lot more code to do like a on-chain voting mechanism. And it might be a bit early to kind of outsource this, before these things are stable. And it's kind of trivial to rip out the config stuff and pass it over later. But basically, like I've prototyped this in Reth and Lighthouse, and it was pretty trivial. And everyone I've talked to has been in favor of this. I actually don't know of anyone that doesn't like the idea of doing a BPO fork change. Blob parameter only is what BPO stands for. And I just wanted to say that on the CL side, as long as your code has a function like similar to the one I just pasted in chat, it's a trivial change. On the EL side, it's already easy because all the ELs have implemented EIP 7840, and you can make a quite easy change to that EIP to just basically, like, instead of having a fork, just have a timestamp on which these parameters are changeable. So I guess I would say that I would hope that sooner rather than later we can come to some kind of consensus that we're going to do this. Just because it makes the code easier. And even if we can't come to consensus on whether or not we're doing like an on-chain voting mechanism or we're doing just a config change to do this, I would just encourage the consensus clients to have a function in their code similar to the one that I just pasted in the chat because it makes it easier to implement. And most, I'm guessing, probably already do because it's already a useful function for just the transition from Deneb to Electra and from Electra to Fulu. But yeah, also I wanted to ask, like, is there anyone that has any arguments as to why we should not do blob parameter only forks?
Yeah, I mean, Oscar is about to just read your messages.
No, yeah, I mean, I would just say I think they're a really elegant solution. Basically, if we find ourselves in a situation where we know that basically with just some future client updates or stability improvements, we can eventually get to a higher throughput number, but like in the initial at the time of the fork, we just haven't been able to get there yet. Then it makes sense. We already know that we have the headroom, so basically that's a really elegant mechanism to then later on make use of that headroom. But I think in my mind, it's basically still a fallback mechanism. So like ideally, we try to like just get to whatever the theoretical maximum throughput we can get with any new technology change at the time of the fork already. And so this should only be a mechanism we use if for some reason we basically just don't quite get there in time.
Right. So, it's a nice idea, and if it's needed, we can do it, but we should try really hard to not need it in the first place. You also brought up the point of having the blob parameters be, say like some quote on-chain vote like we do with the gas limit. This is nice because you would imagine then a validator or, I guess a validator can set their own numbers based on their setup. My concern would be that essentially, operators are apathetic or, just not paying as close attention as they could otherwise. And then we end up in a place where these numbers don't change when they should. Thank God.
Yeah, I would suggest if we do something like that, that we find a better way to set the defaults. Like, for example, you could imagine that by default, your client votes for a value that's actually determined by some smart contract, where like some, I don't know, like core devs vote or something, so that like the default is very easy to change, and then people can override this manually if they want.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. Do you think it would be gated on like, is this essentially like a core dev multisig controlling the smart contract or something else?
Yeah, I mean, that would be like one easy way of doing this. And I mean, that's basically the same as core devs releasing a client, but without having the cumbersome process of everyone installing that new client. So
Right.
I think it's quite elegant to do something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's all well and good. I feel like if it's the same process, it might be just like less code if we just had a release with a config change. Tim just asked like, why not put out a fork? It's just that there's a lot of boilerplate code that goes with an entirely new fork to change just a couple of parameters, and that, it's not a lot of code to make these specific parameters flexible with a small config change. Yeah. Oh, so you don't need a fork ID. The only thing I ran into on the Lighthouse side was that the block size limits, the RPC block size limits right now are a function only of fork ID, and they would need to be made a function of not just fork ID, but epoch. But that's pretty trivial, and I think it's worth avoiding all the boilerplate code of a like standard hard fork to work around that. And the other sort of main reason I would think to do this is just that we can have like full mainnet data. Like we could ship with a conservative target and then have full mainnet data as we decide to tune things. Similar to kind of what we did in Deneb. We didn't ship Deneb with the full capacity because we're increasing it in Vectra. Yeah, go ahead, POTUS.
I suspect that I haven't looked into this at all, but I suspect that there's more than just the block count per epoch. I mean, we presumably the code that computes the KCG proofs would also change. Also, I mean, with all the PRDAS changes now, that also might be changed. But the current situation, if we add this block parameter only forks, I think we will need to like look into the KCG proof generation code.
I prototyped it in Lighthouse and Reth and didn't run into anything other than that.
So there's some
KCG proofs
subtlety here,
don't
though.
depend on the number of blocks.
So yeah, so if we don't change the position of the first index, it doesn't. I think for us, yeah, I need to think about how is it that we do the Merkle proof. It's not the KCG proof itself; it's the proof of inclusion, the Merkle proof of inclusion in the block. What I'm referring to.
Because right now that's set to the max possible, but then wouldn't you just pipe that in from, say, like a config? I do have another question though, if we don't have this be like a formal hard fork. So imagine we just go this config route and you basically just download a configuration from your client. What happens if only half the network updates or something like this? Like if we don't have a forcing function of consensus, then you're going to segregate the network and things break.
I mean, that is what a hard fork does anyway. We have to just tell people that they need to update their clients or they'll fork off.
What if we're telling them that, why not just make it a hard fork?
Oh, I mean,
No, a hard fork is a lot of code. I agree with Mark.
Yeah, it's a lot less development effort.
So the hard fork would be, say, Fulu. It would have this infrastructure to support that configuration or some other mechanism. And then, yeah, the idea would just be like a light fork. I don't know if we want a different name for it, but basically it would just be like, we would treat it like a hard fork, but it wouldn't have all of the infrastructure and code that reflects a new hard fork. Interesting. Paul?
Is the reason that we're focusing on this so much now because we're not confident that we're going to be able to deliver the number of blobs that we want to deliver, or should we just be focusing on delivering
that we
like
won't have
the
mainnet
max?
data. We won't have mainnet data to tune how many blobs or to like understand how many blobs we can deliver before we push it. I mean, I guess, and there's some argument that we might be able to ship it a bit faster if we're more conservative at first, and then we get more data. We can identify bottlenecks in our implementations. We can like be more confident about changing to a higher amount.
I would hope that we could have a reasonable level of confidence of shipping it higher than 16. That's all. So, I would have thought something like 32 or 48 wouldn't be impossible. And, worst comes to worst, we could tweak things when it goes on to something like Holsky.
Right. So I think the path forward is we move ahead with PureDOS DevNets now, stay with the numbers we have. We just need more data. If those look good and we build confidence, then we can start pushing them. And hopefully we can get confidence in higher numbers. And yeah, if we can go all the way to the highest we think we can get with PureDOS as specified today, then we do that and we're all good. If not, this would be one way to ship faster, ship a bit more blob throughput, and then still have the ability to scale up to this theoretical max down the line. So this is kind of a fallback, but it might be a very important one. So it's worth thinking a bit about now. Any other comments or questions? I think that was all we had for PeerDOS today. And maybe a quick PSA. We have been playing around with the timing of the PeerDOS breakouts. There's one, let's see, I think this week they had one, I think it's 10 a.m. UTC to accommodate Asia time zones. And then the idea is to alternate them so that there's one at that time. The next week it's ETH o'clock, so 2 p.m. UTC, alternate to the other time, and flip flop back and forth like this. So just a heads up. Yeah, POTUS, I think that was Dankar. Did you have something to say, or was the hand from another comment?
Oh, sorry, that was.
All good. Cool. Okay. So next up then, Kev wanted to give an update on his work with hardware requirements and the max blobs flag that fell out of that.
Yeah. So I spoke to Erigon. I don't think Gio's on the call, and they said they're fine with it. Jimmy also gave some more comments on the thread, which to me makes it seem that essentially get blobs, there's sort of this reliance on the time in the mempool as well. So you might be able to sort of not need to publish blobs if they've sort of been in the mempool for sort of quite a long time. I'm not sure how we'd codify that, and it's something we'd need sort of without the max blobs flag anyways. I'm not sure if anyone else wants to comment on that. So like if you have like 64 or 100 blobs that have been in the mempool for, let's say, 100, like 1 day, you just don't need to publish those, right? When you've created a block. And I think we don't know what the perfect time is where we can say we don't need to publish it.
This is using the get blobs mechanism.
Yeah.
And the question is when you make the call and when to publish the blobs along with it versus not.
Right. I think we don't know. But this is sort of a bit orthogonal to the max blobs. Right. I don't know if anyone has comments on that.
I remember Terrence did some analysis here. I don't know what he ended up doing.
Okay, cool. I guess if there's nothing else, then yeah, I'd like to call for a finalization on this.
Were there any comments on the PRs?
Just the one that I mentioned about Jimmy for get blobs, but I can double check again.
Enrico?
Just a question. Do you have any stats of today? How many publishing we're gonna save, giving a certain threshold?
Is your question like how much bandwidth you save if you just like don't do the max amount of blobs?
Yeah, I mean, how many of these blobs has been there in the pool for that long, so we can actually not publishing it?
Right. So that's related to Jimmy's comment. He did have numbers. He said the get blobs hit rate was pretty high. Miss blobs per minute range from 0 to 8 blobs. So it's like it varies quite a lot. But I don't see any numbers based on how long the blob has been in the mempool. does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I guess we can ping Jimmy in the chat to ask for more details on that.
Yeah, I guess I don't quite understand how does the get blobs mechanism relate to the max blobs flag?
So one way, well, I guess if the get blobs mech, let's say like sort of a naive scenario where every time you call get blobs, it's like you never need to publish anything. If we was in that scenario, then the max blobs flags would just be not needed because it wouldn't matter, right? Doesn't matter how many blobs you have, you just publish the block and you never need to sort of publish any blobs at the time when you publish the block.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's a bit more it depends on how long the blobs have been in the mempool, so it's not as easy as that.
Right, but there's still a case where it does matter.
Like I mean, like it would matter like in
Like,
practice it would matter like if you get the blob and then you immediately need to create a block, for example.
All right, that's my point. Like, imagine we're not using get blobs, or a node has chosen not to use it for some reason. Then like you would still want this functionality.
Right. I didn't know that you could choose not to use it, but yeah, that would be another scenario.
Well, that's a good question for CLs here. Do we all mandate this behavior? And are we confident in that?
I remember there is a PR from Dustin, I guess, suggesting removing the optionality of get blobs engine API. This is definitely a step in the direction.
Yeah, I agree with POTUS as well. I replied to Jimmy that I think if you just have a bunch of blobs coming into your mempool, you need to sort of propagate those pretty quickly before it's your time to propose, for example. So it doesn't scale as well if there's just a bunch of blobs in the mempool.
Oh, I was referring to something else. I was referring to like we want to have enough blobs that all blobs will not be in everyone's mempool.
To have enough blobs so that all blobs will not be in everyone's.
I mean, if we're relying on every client having every single blob at the time that we're proposing blocks, then we're already relying on everyone downloading all blobs.
Right.
And this is not what we want. We want to be in a situation where the mempool would be throughputing blobs.
But for validators, they still need to. Okay, I see. No, sorry, I see.
Peer does.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or even beyond that, like, because like if every node has all the blobs, then we don't need DAS.
Yeah, right. So it's I think it's silly to like focus on these kind of mechanisms today if we want to get rid of them anyways.
Yeah, Jimmy's data was on I think he said mainnet, so it was using 4844.
Yeah, there's also the point that we could end up in a place where more blobs are in private mempools versus public, and then get blobs doesn't really help there either.
Right.
Yeah, but that's not a problem for local block builders. Like they don't have access to private blobs anyway. And if you have access to private blobs, you're a builder. You can just propagate the blobs norm.
Right. Yep.
Also, just wanted to say about the POTUS comment. I mean, it's true that yes, eventually the mempool doesn't scale, and we are doing all of the sharding thing in the CL because we don't want everyone to download everything. But there is, I think, like still quite a bit of leeway before then, just because things in the mempool are much more relaxed, let's say, than in the CL. Like they have 12 seconds to propagate. And yeah, also like the mempool has like works by announce and pool versus the like how the CL works. So I think there's still like quite a lot of room for things still working in the mempool with all the blobs going through there at throughput levels that would not work on the CL. but yeah, I mean, eventually that is something that we need to address regardless.
Any more comments? Okay.
Nope. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I guess we can sort of ask ELs when they plan to implement it. On the ACDE call. The next thing was the hardware requirements. Did anyone have any comments on that?
Was there a PR or something? I thought we'd already merged one version of that.
I don't think so. I think the EIP is still open. The one part that I was just going to bring up is basically going with Nixo's suggestion for determining how much someone should spend on hardware. I don't know if Nixo wants to add more to that, or if anyone had any strong opinions on it.
But we can probably just get market data from the numbers we have, right? Just find machines that match those numbers.
The idea was that we base hardware requirements on when a person can be profitable running a validator. So we keep those numbers. My suggestion was under 6 to 12 months, but I don't know what you landed on with that. So based on what the current rewards are, that we make sure that any validator who is buying recommended hardware can make up the costs of that hardware within 6 to 12 months.
And I
mean,
think
that's not necessarily sustainable, because if liquid staking massively drives down the validator rewards over time, then we'll be ending up with lower and lower allowed cost for hardware.
Dankred, did you have a suggestion for also? Or do you think we should just go with like a USD amount?
Yeah, I think we should go with the USD amount.
I mean, the thing is, we're at like 4 months right now with making up hardware costs, and so like aiming for 12 months means that we have a 3x increase from here, which would not be a problem. And if we don't keep it under 12 months, then it's never going to be sustainable to run a validator.
I see. So
The thing is, I don't believe that running a validator is the right question for running full nodes. Like, we want full nodes to be run like for other reasons as well. So I don't think that like just the validator economics is the right angle. And yes, like, I mean, sure, ideally we would like it this way, but like there's a way, like, for example, there's a high chance we want to do stake targeting at some point, and that might well mean almost zero returns. Are we then going to say, oh, now you suddenly have to be able to buy your machine for $50? I don't think so.
I guess I don't get Ansgar's comment. Caring more about full nodes without any income.
Well, I'm just
Full nodes
saying
have
well, yeah, of course, but to some extent, full nodes can have different requirements. But I'm just saying, like, in a way, there's always going to be this connection between full node hardware requirements and then staking hardware requirements. And so I think the bigger bottleneck to me is always to make sure that actually people that want to run a full node but don't actually participate in staking can do so comfortably. And then I think every other kind of realistic limit on the network will then come downstream from that bottleneck.
Yeah, I don't think I fully agree with that. I think the requirements between a full node and a validator, at least for a CPU, are like it's pretty significant, right? Just because a validator doesn't need to, sorry, a full node doesn't have some attestation deadline. So they have the whole slot instead of like just 2 seconds or something.
Right, it's definitely a difference. I'm just saying they also have literally zero income from running a full node. So
Right.
basically,
Right.
yeah, that's all I want to say.
Okay, I see. Dankrad, your comment on liquid staking, do you know how much that drives it down? I don't have any numbers on that.
I mean, it is like essentially we don't know. Like the economics basically depend on people's time preference for money and everything, but there's no fundamental reason why we couldn't end up with 100% of each staked eventually and the corresponding lower returns. Like the main problem is that liquid staking basically removes almost all costs of staking because you can keep your token liquid and so on. So if you have enough liquidity, then at some point people might be happy to even do it for just 0.5% returns. It's not like something that will happen immediately, but in 5 to 10 years, you can well imagine that happens.
Right. And I mean, of course, this is the wrong forum for like economics like that maybe, but like just to briefly mention, right, like the problem there is that in principle at that point you can't anchor to validator rewards because there is no like basically you could imagine the scenario of just basically everyone who holds ETH is basically participating in securing the network by delegating or running a node themselves. And so you literally like intrinsically there is no way of making money with that. So you can't basically say the full node requirement would have to be able to pay it out of the reward because the whole point is that instead you have to think about it as a tax for security. So the question is not how much are the rewards and can they cover it, but how much of a tax in this case in terms of like how much you have to pay for your hardware are we willing to place on ETH holders to help secure the network? So basically, it's a spectrum. Right now, we are still more on the you earn money side, and so for now, it's still a reasonable mental model to think of it as like you have to pay for it out of your rewards. But as we slide more and more towards higher percent of people staking, then it's more and more just a security tax, and so then it's not about being able to pay for it out of your income. It's about how high of a burden are we willing to place on people that want to participate in Ethereum via holding ETH.
And what are the thoughts on using a percentage of how much ETH is staked? So like currently it's 32.
Percentage of what? You mean just like across the entire supply?
It's like how much ETH I've staked, and then we say that hardware requirements is like, let's say, for example, 10% of that. Is that a better measurement than using the returns?
Well, one thing is the ETH price is volatile, so that might be kind of hairy to think about. And then you do get to issues like Denkrat and Ansgar are bringing up, where we could kind of paint ourselves into a corner where we get to a place where it's like, okay, now the quote hardware budget is much smaller than it should be.
Denkrat, you unmuted as well.
Yeah, I mean, just the same thing. I think like it's just too volatile. I think like a dollar amount is the thing that's reliable and just like makes sense.
Okay. And if we go over a dollar amount, how does that get updated if it gets updated? Because I think that's what Nixo and Oshin were the motivation behind it.
Are we comfortable with where we are right now, with what's in the PR?
It's currently 1K. Does anyone have issues with that 1K?
Well, I would probably start with the requirements themselves, right? So again, we don't want to get into a place where we're like saying, oh, we have to hit this certain dollar target, because then we could end up in a place where there just isn't enough capacity to run the protocol. So instead, let's be happy with, like, ideally we can find hardware numbers we like to begin with, and then hopefully that's like a reasonable dollar amount. And then in terms of changing it, yeah, I would imagine on some cadence, we can go through a similar process like this and just revisit it later.
That sounds fine to me. Does anyone have any comments? Okay, any comments on the other sort of requirements? We sort of spent a bunch of time on essentially the block building process, and any comments on the full nodes or testers? Where testers
I will surface Osgar's comment here in the chat that things are changing so rapidly. Like there's a lot of uncertainty. So like the way we deal with that is we just try to do our best right now and just iterate as we go. So yeah, let's not spend too much time just going through every little last detail. We should do, a good enough job, but let's not get hung up on a lot of things we just simply won't know.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I'd like to call for finalization on this as well.
Okay. Would you like to merge a week from now?
Yeah, sure.
Great. And if you have any final comments, take them to the PR. Cool. I think that was it for today. Anything else anyone would like to bring up? We do have some time. I think most people are busy with Pectra, as I think they should be. One obvious next big question is talking about Fusaka and its scope coming up. I was kind of thinking we go through the Pectra retrospective process we had discussed, and I think we had agreed we'd kind of try to get final comments in by next week. I'm not sure if there's anything people would like to surface now. Otherwise, probably makes sense to focus on Pectra. We do have Valeshki coming up on, let's see, it's Monday, whatever day that is, the 24th. So February 24th, 9:55 p.m. UTC. So if there are no other topics for today, let's focus on Pectra, and I'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.